You think you understand her. You've laughed with her, cried with her, held her hand through storms, real and emotional. You've studied her preferences, remembered every detail she shared about childhood memories and favorite books. And yet, something always slips through. She'll suddenly pull away after a tender moment or lash out over something trivial, and you're left wondering, what just happened? Now imagine Carl Jung leaning in from across that cafe table and quietly saying, "You've only met her mask." He wasn't trying to be poetic. He was warning you, because in Jung's view, every woman and every man carries layers so hidden even they don't know they exist. The part of her you meet at dinner is just a projection. The real force behind her actions, that lives somewhere far deeper. Jung spent decades watching polite behavior warp under pressure. A loving wife becoming controlling overnight. A doting girlfriend turning cold, even cruel. What drives these transformations? He asked. The answer, for Jung, was never in the surface behavior. It was in the archetypes. The shadow great mother, the devouring animus, the Electra still chasing approval, the maiden hiding her power behind softness. These are not poetic labels. They are scripts written into the unconscious mind. Scripts older than language, older than society, maybe even older than love itself. Modern neuroscience backs Jung's eerie insight. In a 2021 study at King's College London, researchers found that women experiencing emotional triggers activated not just the limbic system, the brain's emotional center, but also regions associated with memory retrieval and instinctive behavior, meaning what she feels now is entangled with everything she's ever felt, especially the things she hasn't dealt with. So when she says she doesn't know why, she feels a certain way, she's telling the truth. But that doesn't mean the reaction is random. Far from it. Behavioral psychologist Dr. Diana Fosha puts it best. Unconscious emotions seek conscious enactment. In other words, unhealed emotions come looking for a stage. This is not about blaming women. It's about understanding the layers of female desire. Why someone can be fiercely independent one moment and long for control the next. Why envy gets called love. Why a smile might hide a battle. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So if you've ever asked, why is she pulling away? Or, why did she change? Maybe you're not looking at a personality shift. Maybe you're looking at an archetype emerging. And maybe it's time to stop asking what she wants and start asking what ancient part of her is speaking. The shadow. Great mother. Love that devours. She'll say she's just being protective. She'll call it love, maybe even just caring too much. But behind the curtain of that devotion is a psychological force Jung called the most dangerous mother of all, the shadow great mother. She nurtures, yes, but she also controls, consumes, and traps. And if you don't recognize her, you'll confuse possession for affection. Jung didn't invent the idea. He uncovered it in myths, dreams, and the behavior of countless clients. This is the side of motherhood that doesn't let go. It's the overbearing mother who keeps her son emotionally dependent. It's the girlfriend who texts you every hour just to check in until your entire life begins to orbit hers. Psychologist Sylvia Brinton Pereira wrote about this in her chilling 1979 book, Descent to the Goddess. She describes how the devouring mother archetype disguises control as comfort, fear as care, and insecurity as intimacy. When a woman hasn't healed her inner wounds, especially abandonment or neglect, this archetype rises from the unconscious, cloaked in good intentions, but driven by fear of being left. And it's not rare. In a University of Toronto study on adult romantic relationships, researchers found that 38% of women displayed a surge in controlling behaviors when faced with the threat of emotional distance. These weren't dramatic fights. It was the subtle sabotage, tracking apps, social media monitoring, accidental guilt trips. Jung predicted this decades ago. When the feminine self feels threatened, the shadow great mother emerges, whispering, "Don't let him go." Take Maria, 32, from a recent therapy case study. She believed texting her fiancé every hour showed devotion, but over time, his world shrank. Friends vanished, hobbies disappeared, and resentment grew. It wasn't until a therapist helped her identify the archetype at work that she could see the truth. She wasn't protecting love. She was feeding fear. So what's the way out? Jung taught that awareness changes everything. When a woman recognizes this archetype, she can ask, am I loving or controlling? Am I offering support or swallowing him whole? And for men, if you notice boundaries shrinking, your autonomy fading, or your peace getting chipped away for love, it's time to re-establish space with kindness, not conflict. Say, I need to miss you sometimes, and watch how the archetype reacts. If she panics, you're not speaking to her. You're confronting something older, deeper, and far more primal. Jung didn't blame the shadow. He respected its power, but he also knew that unchecked, it turns love into a prison. Spotting this early isn't cruelty. It's the highest form of respect for her, for yourself, and for the kind of love that breathes, not binds. Animus, possession. When inner men take the wheel. She's sweet, she's tender, she's everything you thought you needed, until she suddenly shifts. The warmth gets colder, the affection sharper, and suddenly you're not talking to your partner. You're debating with her lawyer. What just happened? Carl Jung had a name for this transformation: animus possession. It's not possession in the spooky sense, it's psychological. Inside every woman lives an inner masculine force. Jung called it the animus. When developed, it's her logic, her confidence, her ability to make clear decisions. But when ignored or repressed, it doesn't stay quiet. It takes over, not with strength, but with argument. Not with clarity, but with domination. She stops relating and starts debating. Dr. Barbara Hanna, a close colleague of Jung's, documented this shift in her rare 1961 work, Animus, the Spirit of Inner Truth in Women. She tracked female patients who began relationships as affectionate and emotionally open, only to slowly transform into combative, cold, overly rational figures the moment deeper intimacy developed, as if their inner man stepped forward to do battle. Modern science caught up to Jung's insight. In a 2022 MIT experiment, researchers used EEG scans to observe women's brain activity during moments of interpersonal tension. The results were stunning. During moments of emotional disconnection, there was a significant spike in left frontal lobe activity, an area linked with analytical processing and argumentation. These women weren't just mad, they were momentarily possessed by thought over feeling. One participant described it perfectly. I knew I was being harsh, but I felt taken over, like I had to win the argument, not understand him. That's not conflict. That's the animus, acting out unresolved identity. But there's a way back. In therapy sessions influenced by Jungian and cognitive behavioral models, women who practiced guided journaling and assertiveness training reported a 42% reduction in relationship conflict over 8 weeks. Why? Because they weren't outsourcing their masculine energy anymore. They were owning it. So what can men do when animus possession shows up? Don't counterforce it. Don't escalate. Instead, engage it. Ask, what's most important to you in this? Or, what's the part of this issue that hits closest to home? These questions don't trigger the animus. They invite the woman behind it to step forward. Because beneath every hard argument is often a soft fear. The fear of not being heard. The fear of losing herself. Jung saw this clearly. He didn't say, defeat the animus. He said, integrate it. When a woman does that, she becomes something incredible. A partner who knows her strength, not just acts it out. And for the man wise enough to recognize the shift, he becomes not her opponent, but her ally in bringing that strength home. The adult Electra. Daddy still decides. You meet her, she's intelligent, independent, full of charm, but there's something else. Something you can't quite name. She lights up around authority figures, melts under praise from older men, yet pushes back hard when you offer guidance or emotional leadership. It's not inconsistency, it's a pattern, and Carl Jung saw it long before most psychologists dared name it. This isn't about childhood anymore. Freud thought the Electra complex, the daughter's psychological struggle with her father's attention, ended in early years. Jung disagreed. He said the complex just changes costumes, and for many women, it grows up with them. She's not 5 anymore, begging for daddy's approval. She's 35, seeking that same validation from a boss, a mentor, or a man twice her age. Only now, it's romantic and far more dangerous. Dr. Maureen Murdoch's underread gem, Fathers, Daughters, and the Pursuit of Identity, 1982, uncovers the adult face of this complex. She followed women drawn to men who held power, not just financial or physical power, but psychological authority. CEOs, professors, pastors. These women often began the relationship wide-eyed and devoted, but eventually felt caged. Their inner child had chosen. Their adult self later rebelled. Data backs this up. A 15-year longitudinal study from King's College London found that women who rated their childhood paternal warmth below 5 out of 10 were 60% more likely to marry significantly older men. And yet, divorce rates in those same pairs doubled once the women reached a point of emotional self-definition. It wasn't the men who changed. It was the woman realizing she'd never made the choice from adulthood in the first place. Take Elena, a 41-year-old artist. She married her former professor, praising his wisdom, structure, and guidance. But years later, the same qualities began to suffocate her. In therapy, she didn't say, "I made the wrong choice." She said, "I never chose for myself at all." Her recovery didn't start with breaking up, it started with breaking free, budgeting her own life, traveling solo, making choices without asking for permission. That's when the complex lost its grip. For men, this dynamic can be intoxicating at first, being needed, being respected, being looked up to, but it's a trap if you confuse worship with love. Jung believed healing comes when relationships are formed by whole adults, not ghostly remnants of childhood needs. If you sense you're her father figure in disguise, try a simple shift. "I trust your judgment. How do you want to move forward with this?" You're not pushing her away, you're pushing her forward. And if she walks with you, not behind you, you'll know it's not the complex choosing anymore. It's her. The female shadow, rage behind the smile. She says she's fine. She smiles. She even kisses you goodnight. But something in the room feels heavy, like a storm's coming, but the sky is still clear. Then the passive-aggressive texts begin. The cold shoulder, the sarcastic jabs. You're left guessing, what did I miss? The answer, you didn't miss anything. You met her shadow. Carl Jung warned that the parts of ourselves we deny don't disappear. They gain power. And for many women, especially those raised to be nice, that repressed part is aggression. Not open, verbal confrontation, but silent punishment, subtle revenge, emotional withdrawal dressed as politeness. It's not personal, it's psychological. Debbie Ford's underrated book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, 1998, explains it beautifully. What we repress ends up controlling us. And for women taught to prioritize harmony and care, anger becomes the forbidden emotion, so it finds a back door, not through yelling, but through distance, not through honesty, but through manipulation. The University of Michigan ran a study using wearable tech called the T-ring, a device that detects micro-changes in skin conductance linked to emotional arousal. In 120 heterosexual couples, spikes in female galvanic responses, essentially stress or irritation, predicted passive-aggressive remarks within 2 minutes. Here's the kicker. Most of these women still reported not feeling angry. Their conscious mind had no idea what the body was already expressing. This is what Jung called projection. Instead of feeling the rage and owning it, the psyche throws it onto the partner. Suddenly, you're the selfish one. You're the ungrateful one. But what's really happening is a civil war inside her. The part that wants power, control, and even revenge is colliding with the identity that says she must always be loving, calm, and agreeable. Healing starts the moment that inner conflict is named. In shadow work therapy, especially in Jungian analysis, women are asked to do something radical, admit their darkest wants. One simple prompt. List 5 socially unacceptable desires you secretly have. In an 8-week pilot program using this method, projection episodes in couples reduced by 48%. Why? Because when a woman claims her rage, it stops needing to disguise itself. For men, the signs are subtle but clear. Sudden distance without explanation, unpredictable mood swings, or guilt trips that feel disproportionate. Don't confront. Invite. Ask. Is there something you wanted to say but didn't? Not sarcastically, curiously. You're not provoking the shadow. You're giving it permission to come forward, consciously. Because the truth is, rage isn't the enemy. Repressed rage is. When acknowledged, it transforms. It becomes boundaries. It becomes passion. It becomes clarity. And sometimes the most loving thing a woman can say is not, "I'm fine," but "I'm furious." The maiden code, weaponized innocence. She's adorable. She giggles when confused, looks up at you when asking questions, and says things like, "I'm just not good with this stuff. You handle it." At first it feels flattering, needed, masculine. But over time, something feels off. You start doing everything. You notice she's far less helpless when no one's watching. And then it hits you. This isn't sweetness. It's strategy. Carl Jung called it the maiden archetype. She represents purity, vulnerability, and the untouched feminine spirit. But like every archetype, the maiden has a shadow, and that shadow weaponizes innocence. It plays weak to gain strength. It hides manipulation under charm. And today, it thrives more than ever. Dr. Esther Harding warned us about this in her 1940 book, The Maiden, an Archetypal Image of Eternal Girlhood. She argued that when a woman clings to the maiden beyond its natural phase, she's not just stunted, she's dangerous, because instead of growing power, she borrows it from men, from systems, from sympathy. And the moment she feels threatened, the wide eyes return. The "please help me" act flips on like a switch. Modern data proves the pull of this act is hardwired. In a 2024 Columbia University study, researchers tracked male eye movements using advanced neuro-tracking tools. Participants viewed female social media profiles showing either overt sexuality or exaggerated vulnerability, pouty expressions, oversized hoodies, soft lighting. The result? The soft girl profiles triggered significantly higher dopamine spikes than the overtly sexual ones. Why? Because vulnerability stimulates protection instincts, and protection feels like bonding. One case that went viral involved a social media influencer known as Lily, with over 3 million followers. She posted about not being able to afford her tuition, crying on camera, asking fans for help. $200,000 in donations poured in. Weeks later, it emerged she already had a degree and a trust fund. That's not fraud, that's maiden manipulation, dressed in pastel filters and faux fragility. So how does a woman move past this archetype? By practicing what psychologist Carol Gilligan called competence exposure, deliberately showing strength, skill, and autonomy, even when it risks likability. Women in a recent Harvard workshop on personal power who practiced financial independence and solo decision-making for 90 days reported a 34% increase in self-esteem and far healthier romantic relationships. For men, the key is discernment. Ask the question, what has she already tried to solve this problem? If the answer is nothing, be cautious. Real vulnerability takes responsibility. Rehearsed helplessness avoids it. Jung never said the maiden was evil. He said she was incomplete. A woman stuck in that phase is like a bird afraid to fly, so she asks you to carry her. But the most loving thing you can do is put her down gently and say, "You've got wings, use them." And if she does, that's when you'll meet the real woman. Dark triad magnetism, craving the dangerous male. She says she wants kindness, stability, emotional safety, and yet over and over she finds herself tangled up with the same kind of man. The charming one who withholds affection, who lies with a smile, who always seems to disappear when she needs him most. Friends shake their heads. Therapists call it self-sabotage. But Carl Jung would have called it something else entirely, a dance between archetype and shadow. This isn't just about bad boys. It's about the dark triad, a psychological profile blending narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And disturbingly, some women find it irresistible. Why? Not because they're broken, but because parts of the unconscious are still trying to solve something ancient. Dr. Verdiana Grace, in her niche but haunting 2011 book, Attraction and Manipulation, Female Desire for the Unstable Male, explored why these traits provoke such high arousal. She proposed that women raised in chaotic environments often equate unpredictability with passion. The erratic becomes erotic. Jung might say the woman isn't choosing a man, she's choosing an archetypal warrior projected onto a dangerously flawed vessel. And the data confirms it. In a 2019 Spanish prison study, researchers gave female volunteers access to pen pal letters from inmates, Inmates with documented psychopathy were rated as more exciting than average male controls, scoring 2.3 times higher on measures of thrill-seeking appeal. The letters weren't romantic. The draw wasn't emotional connection. It was intensity. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes a strange kind of sense. Dangerous men often signal power, dominance, and fearlessness, traits once associated with protection in primitive environments. But as Dr. David Buss noted in his work on mating strategies, evolution doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about survival. Jung would take it even deeper. He believed the anima and animus, our inner male and female spirits, are constantly seeking integration. Sometimes a woman isn't drawn to him, but to the warrior energy she hasn't yet owned in herself. She wants boldness, confidence, danger, not in a partner, but in herself. And until that need is consciously addressed, it will show up in the form of men who mirror it badly. So what's the solution? In therapy, one awareness drill made a difference. Before responding to the next text from a chaotic man, women were asked to write down 3 specific instances where he showed real empathy. If the page stayed blank, it wasn't love, it was projection. In follow-ups, 68% of those women reported losing interest after doing the exercise just 3 times. For men, this insight matters too. If you feel you're always too nice to be desired, understand this. It's not kindness she rejects. It's the absence of presence. Strength and warmth are not opposites. They're a rare combination. Offer both, because when a woman finally meets her own fire, she stops craving men who burn her with theirs. Cognitive traps, hypergamy, halo effects, and other biases. She says it's chemistry, a vibe, a feeling. But what if the real reason she swiped right was because the guy was tall, wore a suit, and mentioned he runs a startup? What if attraction, what we call just knowing, is really a mental shortcut? Carl Jung said the unconscious influences everything we do, especially the parts we believe we're consciously choosing. And nowhere is this more obvious than in modern dating. Beneath her preferences and swipes are hidden biases, rules wired not by logic but by survival instincts, memory glitches, and emotional defaults. Start with hypergamy, the tendency to pair with someone of higher status. It's often dismissed as shallow, but evolutionary psychology sees it differently. As Dr. David Buss notes in his studies, this instinct once increased the survival odds of women and their offspring. Fast forward to today, and the same wiring activates when she sees a man who signals dominance, financial, intellectual, or social. But that doesn't mean he's actually safe or loving. It just means the brain lit up. In a speed dating experiment at Stanford, researchers found that women rated men 5 points higher in trustworthiness and desirability simply if they were over 6 feet tall and wore a buttoned shirt. Same personality, same conversation, just different signals. That's the halo effect, a term made famous by Daniel Kahneman. One positive trait, like attractiveness or confidence, blinds us to flaws. So the man who's charming gets labeled loyal. The one who's decisive suddenly must be emotionally mature. But the brain is making a guess, not a judgment. In Bias in the Heart, 2007, a little-known gem by Professor Mei-Ling Chen, the data goes deeper. In a study of dating app users, 91% of women swiped right on profiles indicating income above median, but post-date satisfaction plummeted when emotional warmth was missing. Why? Because the brain prioritized status under stress, but the heart felt something else entirely once in the room. Here's where therapy comes in. In cognitive behavioral work with women caught in repeated disappointment cycles, a simple reframe made all the difference. A pre-date checklist. List 5 non-status traits you value: kindness, humor, emotional availability, shared values, curiosity. Rate your date on those after, not before, meeting. Results? Participants reported a 46% improvement in choosing partners who led to lasting connection. So what does this mean for men? Don't waste energy trying to become a high-value male based on superficial markers. Be clear, consistent, grounded. That bypasses her biases and speaks to something deeper. And for women, start asking, am I attracted to him or to how he makes me feel about myself in a world full of noise? Because feelings lie, patterns don't. Trauma, imprints, when the past picks your partners. You ever wonder why she keeps falling for the emotionally unavailable guy? The one who ghosts, withholds affection, or gives just enough to keep her hanging on. She knows it's wrong. Her friends tell her he's toxic, but something inside her won't let go. That something, Carl Jung believed, isn't love, it's a trauma imprint. Jung called it repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate childhood pain in adult relationships, hoping this time the ending will be different. It's not a weakness. It's the psyche's desperate attempt to finish a story that was never given closure. Dr. Gabor Mate, one of today's leading voices in trauma psychology, says it plainly in Scars Beneath the Skin, 2004. Trauma isn't the event. It's what happens inside you afterward. And what happens inside many women is a twisted attachment to what feels familiar, not safe, familiar. A 2023 fMRI study at Yale brought this into hard science. Women with high adverse childhood experience, ACE scores, were shown images of different male faces, some warm, some distant. Shockingly, the emotionally unavailable men triggered comfort circuits in the brain, not stress, comfort. Why? Because if your nervous system was shaped around inconsistency, your brain starts confusing anxiety for connection. Take Sarah, 34. She said every man she loved ended up being emotionally cold or manipulative. In therapy, she recalled her father, charming one minute, withdrawn the next. Her nervous system had learned early that love meant guessing, chasing, and proving. That wasn't dysfunction to her, it was home. And here's where it gets deeper. Somatic therapy, like Peter Levine's somatic experiencing, and EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, don't just reframe thoughts. They rewire how the body responds to emotional triggers. In one clinical trial, women undergoing these treatments showed a 55% reduction in attraction to emotionally unavailable partners over 6 months. So what can be done? It starts with asking a hard question. Is this person making me feel alive or anxious? The body doesn't lie. If your stomach's tight but you're calling it butterflies, check again. That might not be desire. That might be your inner child recognizing a ghost. For men, this knowledge matters too. If a woman seems overly reactive to distance or intensely attached too fast, she may not be seeing you. She may be seeing someone from her past. Gently slowing things down, offering consistency, and observing her reactions gives you insight into whether you're building something real or just replaying her past. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That goes for love too. Sometimes the person you're obsessed with isn't your soulmate. They're your unfinished business. Neuroscience of choice, oxytocin, estrogen, and risk. She says she feels drawn to him, that something about him just pulls her in. But when you step back and look closer, he's not kind, not consistent, not even her type. So what's really going on? According to neuroscience, attraction isn't just about personality or compatibility. It's about chemistry. Literally, Carl Jung would have called it fate. Today we know it's brain chemistry playing tricks. The stars didn't align, hormones did. Let's start with oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone. It surges during moments of connection, hugs, eye contact, even deep conversations. But what most people don't realize is that oxytocin doesn't just make you feel close, it makes you forgive. In a 2020 study from the University of Bonn, researchers administered intranasal oxytocin to female participants and found their forgiveness levels after betrayal increased by 23%. Think about that. The very hormone designed to help us bond can also blind us to red flags. And then there's estrogen, which affects dopamine sensitivity. According to neuropsychologist Dr. Mark Solms in his fascinating but little-known book, Feeling Matters, 2015, estrogen amplifies how rewarding new experiences feel, especially during the mid-phase of a woman's menstrual cycle. In plain English, she's biologically wired to seek novelty and take social risks at certain times of the month. That random "I miss you" text she sent her ex might have been a hormonal cue masquerading as emotion. Put it all together and here's the real shocker. The timing of a decision can matter more than the person. Hormonal spikes influence how trustworthy someone appears, how forgiving she becomes, even how intense a casual crush feels. Combine that with social conditioning and emotional wounds, and you have a perfect storm where biology, memory, and fantasy start working together, not to reveal the truth, but to cover it. That's why dark psychology marketers target timing. Think about apology gifts, strategically delayed texts, or public confession videos timed late at night. They're not just manipulative, they're neurologically timed to hijack decision-making. So what's the fix? Awareness and interruption. In a recent study at the Max Planck Institute, participants who waited just 24 hours before responding to emotionally triggering texts reported a 39% drop in regret-based decisions. The brain calmed, the chemicals settled, clarity returned. For women, one practical step is to track both emotional patterns and hormonal cycles, not to judge them, but to understand the rhythm of perception. Before making big romantic decisions, especially reconciliations, ask, is this real or is this hormonal weather? And for men, recognize that her intensity may not be about you. It might be about timing. Don't manipulate it. Respect it. Honesty and patience cut through far more noise than charm ever will. Jung believed fate could be rewritten through self-awareness. Neuroscience now proves it. The truth is, your brain is whispering stories all the time. The question is, are they yours? Integration, from hunger to wholeness. She's done the healing workshops, read the self-help books, maybe even sat in therapy. Yet relationships still feel like a battlefield, need pulling in one direction, fear pulling in another. Why? Because while understanding helps, it's not enough. As Carl Jung insisted, integration is the real destination, not getting rid of parts of yourself, but bringing them all to the table, so no single one runs the show. Desire isn't the problem. Unconscious desire is. Most women are taught to seek completion, someone to make them feel chosen, safe, guided. But that hunger, if left unexamined, turns into dependency. What begins as intimacy quickly becomes sacrifice. You lose your voice trying to be loved. And Jung warned, what starts from lack rarely ends in truth. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl put it plainly, what man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. Love isn't the goal, wholeness is. Once that happens, love isn't something you chase, it becomes something you share. Dr. Helena Corbet's underappreciated study, Union Within, 1996, followed 48 women who committed to developing their inner masculine, not by becoming aggressive or hardened, but by learning agency. They took martial arts, practiced public speaking, learned to code, and over a 9-month period, anxiety levels dropped by 37%, while relationship satisfaction rose by 42%, not because their partners changed, but because they were no longer waiting to be saved. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's also where real love begins. Because when a woman meets her animus and integrates him, she no longer projects him onto men. She doesn't need a father, a savior, or a mirror. She can finally meet a partner eye to eye. So what does integration look like in practice? Start small. Shadow journaling. 2 minutes a day of writing whatever dark, impulsive, or unacceptable thoughts come up, unfiltered. Not to act on them, but to acknowledge them. Bi-weekly, skill stretching. Learning something unfamiliar without outsourcing. Monthly solitude retreats, even if it's just a day without distraction. Checking in with yourself before you check in with anyone else. And for the men beside them, support her wholeness. Not with advice, not with control, but with belief. When you say, I trust your power, and mean it, she grows into it, and she'll stop testing you to prove it. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That goes for both of you. A whole woman doesn't just love better, she chooses better. And when she chooses you, it's not from fear, fantasy, or need. It's from freedom. Beyond illusion, building love that breathes. So here we are, after archetypes, instincts, shadows, hormones, and pain. After masks have been named, inner wars exposed, and hidden cravings brought to light. And what's left? The truth. Carl Jung said, "What remains unconscious appears as fate, but the moment you name it, claim it, and integrate it, you stop reacting and start relating." Love is no longer a reenactment of old wounds. It becomes a conscious act, a living choice. Female desire isn't random, it's not a flaw, and it's not some chaotic mystery for men to decode. It's a combination of biology, personal history, collective myth, and lived truth. And for most women, it begins in hunger. The hunger to be seen, to feel safe, to feel guided. But that hunger can either push her toward illusion or lead her into awakening. Because here's the real test. Can she want you without needing you? Can she walk beside you instead of beneath you? Can she own her strength, her sensuality, her darkness, without using it to manipulate, test, or trap? And for men, the question flips. Can you stop performing for approval? Can you stand firm when her shadow rises? Can you love her without rescuing her and challenge her without controlling her? The healthiest relationships aren't perfect. They breathe, they flex, they honor boundaries without building walls. Carl Rogers called this unconditional positive regard, the rare ability to witness someone without judgment, without needing them to be different in order to feel secure. And then there's Viktor Frankl's quiet challenge. Love is not simply a feeling, it is an act of the will, not passion alone, but presence, to choose each other in your wholeness, not your halves. So what do you do with all this? You make it practical. Ask real questions. Not do you love me, but where am I still unconscious? Not why did she do that, but what part of her or me is speaking right now? Bring curiosity instead of control. Practice radical honesty, not just with your partner, but with yourself. Trade control for connection. Trade fantasy for freedom. Let her be complete. Let yourself be whole. Because when two conscious people meet, love isn't a performance. It's not a game. It's not a mask. It's a mirror. And when that mirror reflects not illusion, but truth, you won't just feel loved. You'll finally feel seen. And maybe, for the first time, you'll realize that's what you were really craving all along.